Hi students, I wanted to create a video to help further explain your results from the Young Typology Assessment Tool. Remember that tool that you took this week is also very similar to the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI, which is a very, very popular tool in career counseling because they look at 4 different areas of your personality. So I wanted to give you some personal examples to help you better understand the results. So the first area is the dichotomy of introversion versus extroversion. And so some people lean a little bit more towards introversion, some people lean a little bit more towards extroversion. Now keep in mind we can display characteristics of both. Sometimes I need alone time. Sometimes I like to be around other people and be social and have a lot of stimulation. So it's very true that we have tendencies towards both. However, some of us, we're going to naturally lean one way versus the other. So we're naturally going to have a stronger fit in one of these dichotomies. But it's very true that we can display characteristics of both in some of the areas. So in introversion versus extroversion, this is a perfect example where I'm very close. My results are very close of both dichotomies. However, I'm more stronger on the extroversion side. And introversion versus extroversion doesn't mean are you an extrovert or an introvert. That doesn't mean are you good at being social or are you a homebody. It's talking about where do you plug in to gather your energy. So what energizes you? Is it being in the outer world with people and things and lots of stimulation, or is it being in your inner world with your thoughts and your feelings? So I'll give you a perfect example because my husband leans more towards introversion, I lean more towards extroversion. So we're at a family party and we're about 4 or 5 hours at this family party. And there's music and there's kids running around and there's food and people to talk to. We get back in the car to go home and I'm amped up. I've just spent 4 or 5 hours in my outer world. So I'm still pretty amped up and energized because that gave me energy. He, on the other hand, that zaps his energy. So in the car ride home, when I'm kind of ready to talk and say, hey, you know what happened to cousin so-and-so? And hey, wasn't this great? And did you see the kids running around? He does not want to talk at all. He wants to do the whole car ride in silence because he wants to spend more time in his inner world to regather his energy. So that's kind of an example personally to show the difference between introversion versus extroversion. However, this area can also be tricky. I had a college friend who was the life of the party. You wanted her to come to every party with you because she was funny and dancing and social and you just gravitated towards her. However, the next day, you wouldn't see her at all, even though you wanted to spend more time with her because you just had a great night at a party with her. Being at the party, she's really good at being in that outer world, and she really is good at extroversion skills. However, her true personality, where she gathers energy, is in that inner world. So even though she had great skills at extroversion, it really zapped her energy, and that's why the next day you wouldn't see her for 24 hours because she had to be in her inner world to kind of regroup because that really zapped her energy. So that's a little explanation of introversion versus extroversion. It can be tricky to observe in others. It doesn't exactly mean are you an extrovert or an introvert. It really is asking you where do you plug in to gather your energy. Sensing versus intuition. So let me explain this with a picture if I can. Take a minute to look at this picture. Okay, that was probably less than a minute, but for those of you who lean more towards sensing, sensors are those who pay attention to small details. So you might have been looking at the card being passed between the dogs. You might have been noticing the time on the clock. You might have been noticing this little writing down here on the left-hand side and the bottles in the background. So those who are sensors pay more attention to the small details. They like established rules and protocol. Sensing versus intuition is talking about how do we take in information. So when you're presented with when you're presented with something like a picture, what do you pay attention to? How do we take in the information? Those of us who lean more towards intuition are big picture thinkers. Some of you might have been thinking, oh, they're playing a game. I wonder why they're playing the game. And one of them's cheating. I wonder why he's cheating. What's going to happen if he loses the game? Or you might be thinking of a bigger story behind it versus the small little details in the picture. So again, it's just a natural way of how do we take in information. Some of us lean more towards the sensing side. Some of us lean more towards the intuition side. But you have to think about how this plays into a career. So think about working for Apple or for software development that creates new phone apps or new websites or something like that. Those people that create ideas and create new apps and create new tools to use, those are the intuition people because they're the big picture thinkers. They think of the future ideas. They think of how great this would be. However, those people also need to have those who pay attention to the small details. Because if you have a room full of people who just create ideas, you'll never get anything done unless you have those of us who lean more towards sensing, who could create a timeline and talk about budget and how would this play out and the things you have to think about in order to get that idea off the ground. So neither one is good nor bad. We need both, especially in the career field. But it just you have to think about what do you lean more towards. Are you leaning more towards the sensing side or the intuition side? And what careers might be a good fit for that to play on those personality types that you have and that personality characteristic. So keep in mind, sensing is the one that are the small details. They definitely like rules and protocol. They pay attention to the here and now. They use their senses when they take in information, such as their sight, their smell, their taste, their hearing, their touch, because that's present in the here and now and that's concrete, versus the intuition. Those are the big picture people. They look at patterns. They pay attention to their intuitive gut feeling. And so, again, you have a tendency to lean one way towards the other. I lean more towards my sensing side, so I'm a small detail type person. The next area is thinking versus feeling. And this talks about how do we make our decisions in our lives. So when we have to make a decision, do we lean more towards our logical thought process, or do we trust or we turn to our feelings? So again, personally, my husband and I are very different. I lean more towards the feeling side. He leans more towards the thinking side. So we had a medical decision to make. And his first questions to the doctor were, well, what's the statistics if we choose this treatment? What's the rate of success? He had all those questions about statistics and how successful and numbers, and he wanted to be very logical about making this decision. I, on the other hand, I heard all that information, but I went towards my feelings. How would I feel if we weren't successful? How sad would I feel? How hopeful? How hopeless? I just went inside towards my feelings and used that to help me make a decision versus the statistics and looking at all the data. So again, it was just that's the natural way that we went to how to make a decision. And then we had to come together and talk about it. But our innate kind of where our mind or our feelings went to first were very different. Because again, he leans more towards thinking when he makes this decision, and I rely more towards the feeling side. Neither one is good nor bad. It's just how we innately go about our personality goes to when we make decisions. That doesn't mean I disregard data. It just means that's not my first initial jump to that area. last area is talking about how do we like to organize our outer world. Are we planned and structured, or do we like spontaneity and flexibility? So again, this is perfect. My husband and I are very different. I lean more towards judging. He leans more towards perceiving. Those who lean more towards judging like structure. They like to be organized. They like action in order to get things done. They like deadlines, and they like to plan things out. Those who lean more towards perceiving are much more flexible, spontaneous. Planning is that they can plan, but they can change their plans, and they're okay with that. And so this kind of picture clearly represents how they get to a deadline. Those who are judging are very planned, have markers to where they meet deadlines, and then when they work towards this deadline, and they have a very planned out way of doing things. Perceiving can kind of be all over the place and make it just in time. Procrastinators tend to be more on this perceiving side because, again, they're very spontaneous, flexible. Things can change. Something better can come up. So let's just wait to the last minute. So if my husband and I are very different in this sense, I plan out my day from the moment I wake up. And it's just a natural thing. I think about, okay, what do we have to do today? And in my head, I kind of have it planned out. Whether it's running groceries or getting lunch together, I have it kind of planned out in my head of how we're going to do our day. My husband, on the other hand, wakes up and has no idea of the day. He knows we have to do groceries or run some errands. But if I said, hey, let's take a quick trip to the beach, he'd be like, okay, sure. And along the way, let's stop and get food. Okay, sure. He has no problem with changing his plans, whereas I have to kind of readjust and recalculate when something spontaneous comes up. It's kind of funny. We went on a trip to Hawaii, and I planned for a no plan day. Like Thursday was our day where we were going to sit on the beach and not do anything. But I had to plan for it in my head. I'm not that rigid, but that's just the way I organize my outer world, whereas he's a lot more spontaneous and flexible with his relationship with the outer world. Again, can I be spontaneous sometimes? Sure. Can my husband sometimes plan things out? Sure. But it's not our natural way of being. We kind of have to work at it. I have to work on being a little bit more flexible and spontaneous. So, again, I hope this helps to explain a little bit, either take a laugh at my family, or at least use those examples to help you understand your results a little bit better. And you can start maybe seeing this in other people, which, especially your close family or friends, which way they lean towards. If you have any further questions or need any more explanation or help, please let me know. Email me. I'm happy to help with any of the information. Okay? Have a great week.